I like to follow up a little bit on Venerable Jigme's talk, but go further into wishing to instill more hope and optimism into us that we can overcome all challenges of life through resilience, through love, compassion, and bodhicitta. So some time ago, I had the opportunity to read a copy of a diary from my friend's mother, who was born about 100 years ago, and she died 2 years ago in a very peaceful manner. So I had the opportunity to be with her in the last months of her life, and I was astonished by her joyfulness, her liveliness, and her brilliance in her mind, her awakeness. So this diary I read revealed to me a perspective of a life of a German girl and young woman who lived before the Second World War, during the Second World War, and after the Second World War. And she describes certain hardships she experienced, certain joys she also experienced, and that basically how she came out of it depended all on her attitude. So I think in general, Germany is a very good example of how to overcome challenges. So who would have known that after the World War II, 1945, that Germany will develop to a very prosperous, well-developed, economically well-developed and educated country, one of the most developed countries in the world. And so Germany did a very good job in rebuilding itself, but it could not have done it by itself either. So there were a lot of countries involved, such as America, to help Germany to rebuild from the very scratch. So I would like to invite you through a little journey of history to learn about the power of resilience and cooperation, compassion, love that's expressed in our own history here in the West. So, and I will share this part of history through Eva's lens by sharing parts of her diary with you. So we really can't say when it all started, right? The Second World War has many causes and conditions to it. But I like to start with the Great Depression in 1929, when the American economy dropped. That affected Germany as well. Before Germany before 24, had already an economic problem and agriculture problem, but then they got some fundings from the US and could stabilize themselves. But with 29, it dropped, and also the US made it more difficult to accept exports from Germany, for example. Germany was not the only country, it was in world economic crisis. So, but then many people in Germany felt left alone by their own parties, and they learned about the new party, Hitler's party, the NSDAP, and Hitler and its party members promised economic growth and jobs. So more and more people basically joined that party during the Great Depression, and it became more and more power. And Eva writes in her diary that her father, her parents owned a farm, and she was just in the beginning of her teens at that time during the Depression. But she recognized that their parents could not sell the farming products anymore. People didn't have money to buy it. So then the unemployment rate rose from 1.3 million in Germany up to 6 million just within 3 years. Then in 1934, as many of you may know, Hitler gained power. He and his party, the NSDAP, was the strongest party, and Hitler made laws that anybody who speaks against him or his members of the party will be basically expelled or killed or imprisoned. So then the the attack on the Jews started as well more intensely. And Eva describes in her diary that they had, for example, neighbors. One neighbor was not agreeing with the party goals, and so the people have been forced to hang flags of the Nazis, the supporters of Hitler, of this party. You all know this swastika sign. And so one farmer refused to do that, and they knew that he may get killed by doing that, by refusing to hang the flag outside the window. Another farmer was of Jewish background, and he had 4 children. And as soon as Hitler came to power, they left, but heard that he killed all the children and himself out of fear that they could get harmed. So then Eva continues in her diary that when she was 12 years old, she writes, the Nazis' hand reached out to me. And because from 1939 onwards, all children were obliged to join Hitler's youth movement or the Federation of German Girls. So even against the parents' will, Eva joined the Federation of German Girls, as many had to join. She was very young and but interested in certain aspects of what the German Federation for Girls had to offer, such as sport, music, arts, and she excelled very well in that. But soon after, she got appointed to take on more responsibilities to support the Nazis, and that was a turning point where her family and herself then moved away more north to a town called Schwerin, or nearby Schwerin, that will play an important role later on. By then, the Second World War was already full in motion, and the Allies started to bomb Germany. And she describes hiding in a bunker as the Allies flew over the cities and destroyed the towns, and how they themselves have been affected by that and all the smoke that came from the towns because the Allies dropped firebombs, so the towns basically burned completely down. And then also from 1933 to 45, up to 1.6 million people have been registered to be imprisoned in the concentration camps. And there have been about 1,000 concentration camps alone in Germany. More than 1 million people died there, and in April 1945, the SS, the Hitler's protection squad, sent about 20,000 inmates from the concentration camp Sachsenhausen, where alone 300,000 people died. They sent 20,000 inmates in 1945 to a so-called death march towards the north, towards Schwerin, where Eva and her family lived. So it was not uncommon then for the young Eva to meet those inmates there who managed to flee from the march. And she describes how she got robbed of her bicycle, or how she got robbed of her watch, or something like that, or how she got approached by a man who showed her basically a mass grave. In May 1945, then the American troops marched into Schwerin and helped the surviving inmates. But 1 month later, the Russians came and took over this part of Germany, the whole eastern part of Germany. And when the Russian came, another period of fear and sometimes brutality started. And it's reported that the Russian army raped at least 2 million girls and women during that time. And Eva reports in her diary too that her sister, who stayed in Schwerin, got raped many times by Russian soldiers. But Eva herself, she managed to flee and run to Hamburg, basically, the northwestern part of Germany where the American troops had control over. And there she did not experience such cruelty, but other kind of difficult challenges, such as displacement, hunger, lack of housing, as over 60% of the town has been completely destroyed. So after all this, I think this made Eva and many other women and men even stronger. So Eva, for example, she, after the World War II, she trained as a teacher for dance gymnastic and supported her husband, who was a dentist, to build a dental clinic. And they, as so many Germans, had to share the little space of living room they had. They lived in one apartment with many families, so they basically used their own living room to treat patients. So the path forward was not by giving up hope, but to work with steadiness for a brighter future. And that's what the Germans did. German cities especially were to most of its part destroyed, but they built it up again. And remember, they did not accomplish it alone, so allies helped to support them economically and financially. Hundreds of thousands of women helped as so-called Trümmerfrauen, or Rappelwomen in English, and to tear down those parts of the buildings that have survived the bombings and save material that could be reused for building the cities again. And my grandmother on my father's side was one of those Trümmerfrauen in the front. So this was hard work, but it connected these women with each other socially. It helped these women to support each other, that also to learn that they are not alone with their suffering, with their problems. And many of the women had to send their children during the war and after the war to the countryside. I think more than 2 million or up to 5 million children lived on the countryside during the war and after the war to protect them from the bombing or because there was food shortage in the towns. So my grandmother too had to send my father to the countryside when he was very little. So no step could have been done if these women, for example, would have hanged on to their stress so much that it demobilizes them. And my grandmother always kept optimistic, so did Eva. And I never saw my grandmother making a sad or depressed face. She was, as I remember her in my early childhood, always very generous and calm and just big sunshine. So it's with us. No matter how hard our life is or will be even in future with all the climate change or whatever we will experience, it all depends on our attitude, how we come out of it. And if we think of others with compassion, with kindness, connect with others, such as the Trümmerfrauen did that, for example, if we help each other, we will find strength. And in addition, as a Buddhist, of course, applying compassion and bodhicitta, the wish for others' happiness is a big protection for us. Thank you.